the solo in that is so dreamy and feeling and just swells. Here, I'm going to do the hand thing that you guys are doing so nobody can see all three of us doing it.
And it's a trifecta.
There you go.
Welcome to Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Okay, welcome back to Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good, and I have a special guest. Again, Pete Pardo. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you this morning?
Good.
Outstanding.
Thanks for having me back.
We love to have you on. Trust me.
What was your idea? So it kind of
True. I think we would have felt like we were stealing the idea if we actually did it without you on it. Pete's with seaoftranquility.org. You want to give us a quick rundown on that one?
Sure, yeah. So we've got a webzine called Sea of Tranquility, like Craig just mentioned, www.seaoftranquility.org. We cover all sorts of forms of heavy metal, progressive rock, jazz, fusion. It's mostly like a webzine, so we do like album reviews, concert reviews, band interviews. So we've got that. We've had that since 2001. I also have a very popular YouTube channel called, you can look it up by Sea of Tranquility Prague, where I do rants and product reviews and top 10 songs and history of bands and all that kind of stuff. And I also don't want to forget, I got a second YouTube channel called Comic Book Geezers, where my buddy Wild Bill and I talk about the old vintage comic books from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's my wrap-up.
Yeah, and their collection is insane. I watch it just for the collections.
It's cool vintage stuff.
So today we are going to hit the solo. I think what the part of the discussion we had before this was it technically could be anything. Drum solo, voice solo, guitar solo, but I think we're probably going to focus in on guitar solo. I think all mine I'll actually fall into that.
I didn't get that memo. I thought it was guitar solos.
Yeah, mine are all guitar solos.
Mine too. Okay, so today we're going to do the guitar solos. And I think we're going to talk quickly about the kind of the history of soloing in general, and then kind of move into our top 10 with
20-ish.
One honorable mention? Seven honorable mentions. 7?
Yeah, whatever.
12.
We'll see how it goes, I guess. Right?
So I'll preface this whole podcast by saying that I didn't have the same struggle you guys had, and I'll explain why. For me, guitar solos are something that, as my wife described, I make everybody shut up in the car when the solo comes on.
Fair enough.
And that was what comprised my list. Honestly, I ended up with 18 and had to whittle it down. I know we're actually, communicating through Google Hangouts, and I can see George's face is wincing at this point.
Oh no, because I was counting mine to see if I had more than you did.
Did you start with more than I did?
I would almost guarantee it.
Pete, you have
my original list was in the 30s, so
Jesus.
I had 33 to start with, and it's down to 14-ish now. So
well, yeah. And there was a couple that I immediately eliminated because I felt they were more features, or the actual song was quote unquote a solo. And actually, I'll tell you what, I kind of read over a little bit of the history of the guitar solo, but Pete, you want to jump in with what you kind of what your knowledge is on the guitar solo?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the guitar solo first really started to come into prominence in the mid 60s. And, there were plenty of quick interesting guitar solos before that. You had some of the Elvis Presley stuff, and some of that early kind of rock and roll. You had some interesting leads, I'm going to call them, that kind of broke away from the norm in popular music. It's like all of a sudden it's like, wow, what is this, right? But then I think the guitar solo really kind of took on a life of its own, and again, we keep going back to the usual suspects here, but, with Hendrix and Clapton and Beck and people like that. And the late 60s, I think, really transformed popular music and made famous, or that element of instrumental virtuosity in like popular music. And I think that was kind of the emergence of the guitar hero right around that era. And then, of course, throughout the 70s and certainly in the 80s, that even became more prominent. And I think all that kind of spawned, and you guys all remember this pretty well, I'm sure, like the instrumental guitar album that all of a sudden became like the norm in the 80s with, guys like Steve Vai and Satriani and Malmsteen and all of this. We could list a million of them.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of taken on like a new level over time. But then, we saw in the 90s where the guitar solo kind of disappeared for a while and people really weren't interested in guitar solos anymore for a while. Of course, they've kind of come back, but I still think that, and we'll see if I'm wrong, but I think that the majority of the songs that we're all going to mention here, the guitar solos we're going to mention here, are probably from a specific era, and it may not deviate much from that, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what you guys think. So, and I think, one more thing I want to touch on, and I think I'm probably going to touch on this more, especially when I talk about my picks, is that the guitar solo took on, it's not just something that was thrown into these classic songs or songs, whatever they are. The guitar solo actually became like an entity within itself. It spoke to the listener. And it just became memorable in almost the same way that maybe the chorus or the vocal melody did. And I think that's what really took it to another level. It wasn't just something that was there. It was a huge part of the song and an equally important part of the song as all the other elements.
Yeah, they kind of wrote the song around it almost at points.
Yeah.
In time.
Well, I think it depends on the band and the guitar player also. I mean, as far as how much emphasis was put on it. I mean, because if you're a great band with a great vocalist, I mean, you emphasize on the writing and the on the vocal part of it. If you were Led Zeppelin, you had both. I mean, you could do either or. I mean, so it was kind of I think it also depends on the quality of the band itself. I mean, if you had a guitar player shredder, I mean, I think a lot of times it focused more on that, and most of the songs had solos as opposed to, some did and some didn't when, the band had a more average guitar player.
Well, I think your comment about Led Zeppelin is great because that band was for very unique individuals, and it's almost like you were waiting to see what each one would contribute to each song. Whereas some of the other stuff, like let's be real. If you're listening to an Yngwie Malmsteen song or record, you're waiting to hear the guitar solo. There's really, it's not that noteworthy for anything else, right?
Exactly.
So yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that Satriani and Malmsteen stuff kind of throws back to where. See, I should reach back further. Classical music for me is something that I love to listen to, like Paganini playing, one of his pieces on guitar. Somebody playing that is amazing. And I don't really consider that a solo, but it is a standout of the guitar in a song, but it's kind of the whole song. So through that, I kind of eliminated 3 or 4 of my songs immediately because they're the song. I mean, I won't do, say anything by mentioning it, but Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee by Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme is just a solo. I mean, that's kind of all it is. That's the whole song.
You bring up an amazing point, and I'll tell you right now, and again, you'll see it in my list. My top 10 does not include, now that I'm looking at it, there is one. Sorry. But for the most part, Asterisk. I took out most instrumental, 4-minute long solos. So in other words, anything by like Vai, Satriani, Malmsteen, what have you. I said, you know what? Because is that a solo? Or is that a song? The whole song is a solo, pretty much. And I kind of struggle with that a little bit, although you will see one kind of fits into that mold because I couldn't not include it. But I struggle with that as well.
See, I avoided those almost completely because it kind of goes without saying, like you said, Vai, Satriani, those, I mean, they're Olympian athletes at their instruments. So, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's almost like mailing it in, to register one of those guys as a guitar solo, well, yeah, duh. So right. I kind of.
So you don't have any Stevie Ray Vaughan on your list then? Is that what you're saying?
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Yeah, yes, I do have, but
Look, I think we could all pick like one band that's going to be on each one of our lists because I think we know each other well enough now to know. I can tell you that there's probably a Boston one on your list, and you can tell
actually,
me
no, there's
what.
not. No, there's not.
Okay. So, anyways, but going back to that idea is again what I read on it. It was kind of 50s and 60s where that idea came about. Like you said, Pete, that you became the guitarist became known. Like you knew the name of the guitarist. You got into the 90s, you still kind of knew the name of the guitarist here and there, but as you got into the late 2000s, it was just the band. You didn't really hear from a guitar player anymore. It's starting to come back around a little bit with like Buckethead and stuff, but
not mainstream though.
No,
when
true.
was the last time when was the last time you actually said in a song that was, other than, there's plenty of bands that have great songs that have great guitar solos in, but it's not like really mainstream stuff.
Right.
But when was the last time you heard like a mainstream song that, that the majority of the people have heard that has a hot guitar solo?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore.
Well, the radio won't play it because it takes up too much time.
Yeah. In fact, my number one on my list, I couldn't tell you who the guitar player is. I know. But I did want to mention that one of the songs that, and again, looking through history, that kind of talked about surf music being the start of the guitar standout. And I did actually have Miserlou on my list by Dick Dale and his Deltones. And I took it off for the reason that it's more just a musical solo throughout the whole song.
Yeah.
But I actually started my list with it on there and took it off. But
and I suspect too that none of us are going to have on our list, and it's probably a shame, but it is what it is. One of the kind of genres we haven't even touched on here, also from that same time period, and probably even before, is like the Mississippi Delta blues stuff. I mean, those old blues songs were littered with guitar solos.
Yep.
Does anybody listen to that stuff, right?
I have some.
You do? All right. Well, kudos to you, George.
Sort of a new flavor of it, but I had Muddy Waters on my list, and B.B. King came up, and certain of that flavor, because that's when I think guitar solo, I do think Stevie Ray Vaughan, I think B.B. King, I think along those lines, and that's just my preference as opposed to like a Stevie Ray Vaughan where it's just almost too much. It's almost like sensory overload for me. I like to be able to hear it and to feel it and to get into it. And you and Craig both play guitar, so it's a little bit different vibe for you guys. And I want to interject one of these times, maybe after this one or a few down the road, we're gonna have to do one with like lyrics and singers, songwriters, and performances.
Nobody cares about that stuff.
I know. It's all about the guitar. I know. But
they don't even let the bass player in the sessions most of the time, do they? It's
not unless you're at Geddy Lee or Les Claypool, probably. But.
Well, I tell you what, we'll go in circles. We'll start with our guest at 10. I had mine in order. I don't know if you guys had yours actually in order.
Yeah,
but,
I do.
Okay, we'll start with our guest. What's number 10 on your list?
Number 10 on my list is kind of a odd one here, but I had to put it on here because the guitar player is just so damn amazing. And if he did not appear in my top 10 somewhere, I think a lot of people would revolt. So it's In the Dead of Night by UK, featuring guitarist Alan Holdsworth.
Holdsworth is an amazing guitar player.
Yeah. And I actually had 3 songs of his in my original list, each with a different band, one of his solo tunes, and it really was a hard choice to figure out which of the 3 I wanted. Another one was a song that he did with the Soft Machine, and another was Devil Take the Hindmost, which was one of his solo tunes, which I almost left in there, but man, that solo in the Dead of Night, it just sends chills up and down your spine. It's like one of those solos that just kind of, and I know our listeners can't see what I'm doing, but like I'm doing this kind of like up and down flying motion with my hands, and that's like kind of what the Holdsworth solo does in that song. It just like kind of drops in and just like flutters and flies all over the place, and it's just dazzling and incredible, and I can't say enough about it. And it's probably technically a better solo than almost anything else that's going to appear on my list, but I just think that a lot of the other songs that are or the solos that are on my list are a little more iconic, and I kind of put them ahead, but it's not meant to limit the impact of In the Dead of Night. I think he did a fantastic job on that. So that's my number 10.
Yeah, I'll actually put up a Spotify list with all the songs on it so everybody will get to kind of experience them. And, to echo what you said, I think that I had really struggled with my list of being iconic as compared to my favorite. I mean, we did the top 25 not too long ago, and, it was more what actually influenced rock. And this is kind of more of our personal preferences. So I'm glad to hear something that I may have heard in passing, but I haven't really sat and listened to it. So the chance to go to the Spotify list and listen to songs like that is going to be really beneficial for me to dig in and hear something different. So,
right. I kind of went with songs that I guess that I some of them are iconic. I think more of my list than not are just the ones that I really love. So
yeah,
most of mine's that way too.
Yeah. And I think that's what we kind of stuck with, and was my hope for it. There are a couple of mine that end up being iconic only because it's the feels for me. But like I said, my definition was, my wife said literally in the car, it's the ones you make us shut up for when we get to the solo. So what do you got for number 10, brother?
Sadly,
Boston.
No.
Oh.
Growing up, I liked a lot of different music, and for as campy and as I don't even have a word. It's We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. Now, I mean, the puzzle, again, you can't see what we're looking at, but the puzzled look on both y'all's faces is priceless.
But you know what it is, though? As both of us as guitar players, we're trying to think of what the solo is in that song.
Exactly what I'm doing.
No, I know.
I will be honest, I never in a million years did I think you were going to kick off with that.
Same here.
But now that I got the song going in my head, I'm like, yeah, simple solo.
Yeah.
It was simple, but for some reason it always stuck out to me, and halfway through the solo, both guitars are playing the same solo, and for them to both play it exactly in sync, I mean, granted it's recorded and mixed, however, but it always stuck out to me that it was just simply cool. I don't know, again, I went by feel, like the song itself or the solo itself, and again, you guys play guitar, so it's probably going to be a major difference from me to you guys, but that's why it's number 10 on my list. It was simple, but it always stuck out as when that song came on. I'm like, I always had to listen to that song to get to the solo because I always dug the solo. So I mean, that's why it's on my list. And I mean,
it's basically 4 or 5 notes and a whammy bar. That's pretty much it.
Exactly. And again, there's not much to it, but I don't know why it always stuck out to me, but I think because both guitar players actually finished the solo exactly in sync, and that's why it always stuck out to me. So.
Sometimes simple is okay. So
it is. My number one is actually quite simple. And, to touch off what you said, brother, Pete probably knows this as well, but a lot of guitarists, when they record an actual song, the rhythms and the chords for the rhythms are usually double tracked, meaning you play it once and then you actually physically play it a second time. You don't take the line and copy it over and just paste it to make it more round. You actually re-record it and get it as close to it as you can. 2 of the ones on my list are actually where they double tracked the solos, and it gave it a really different feel because they're a note off here or there, or even actually go in a different. In fact, number 10 for me is Stone Cold Crazy by Queen.
That's a great choice.
Yeah, I love the solo in that because of that. He's double tracked his solo, and occasionally you'll hear it go off from the left and right will go off just a little bit, and I think it's also one of the first times I realized that a lot of soloists, and I didn't realize this probably 7 or 8 years ago, that a lot of soloists use a wah pedal for their solos. I had no idea that was such a heavy thing. And then going back and listening to songs like this, where he did lean on that heavily for his solo, but that song is a good song anyways. The Metallica remake is okay till you get to the solo, and then Brian May is just blows it out of the water when you look at that.
Can we just stop for a second and give that man some credit?
Oh man,
Brian May, for me, is one of the most unique guitar players that ever walked this earth.
Agreed.
And I don't think that he gets the just due that he deserves.
I would have to agree.
Yeah, I think, and you know, he also did it with guitars that he designed himself.
Oh yeah, which he still plays to this day.
Exactly, and there's, you know, you can get signature models of them, and they sound amazing. I've played through one at one point, but yeah, I agree. He's an amazing writer, period, but a soloist, and even the little. I almost put it on there. I almost put We Will Rock You, the solo from that, on there, because that's one of the first solos I learned, but that's an amazing solo as well. You're right. I think he just gets overlooked way too much.
Yeah.
So
very lyrical player, and all the different effects he uses and whatnot. It's just, man, nobody sounds like him.
Yeah.
He's like his own little orchestra all
Exactly.
by himself, you know.
Pete, what do you got for 9?
All right. So my number 9 might surprise you guys, and I'll just tell a little
Guns N'
story
Roses.
behind it. So no, that you're not going to get that today. Sorry, or any other day. This song this is probably the only song on my list that could be considered like a pop song. It was a extremely popular song, and the story behind it is back when it first came out, which when we're talking like early 80s here. I remember, like, for fun, before we started driving and stuff like that, my buddies and I used to go to a local roller skating rink, and we would go roller skating and try to pick up girls and whatever. And I remember this song was hugely popular that summer, I think it was. And every time it came on, I would sit there on my roller skates and break out into air guitar, because it just, you couldn't not do it. The solo was just so incredible. And it's not the best solo by any stretch of the imagination by this player, but it's the one for me that it was just so perfect in this song. And the solo was just as memorable that you could hum it and almost sing it as the vocal line. And the song is Beat It by Michael Jackson featuring Eddie Van Halen.
Damn it, that's on my list too.
Well, it was an honorable mention for me, but man, that is.
I mean, it's not Eddie's best solo by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, no.
But man,
No.
it's like, it's just so damn memorable.
That's actually number 9 on my list.
Is it?
Hey, that makes it real easy. Oh, you guys just talk about this, and then we're done, and I can move on to mine. No, I agree, and I think Eruption was actually on my list, but again, I took it off because it was an instrumental. But I think
Cathedral was my honorable mention.
But I think that was, honestly, you just said it wasn't his best solo. I actually think it was his best solo. I think
probably most perfect solo.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
I agree with you there.
There you go. Better. I really enjoy the
well
feel
constructed.
of that. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of my small issues with the early Van Halen stuff was, that it was almost too much of a feature in their songs. Like, it was almost a step away from their music. It was music, step away and do a solo and come back and do the music. So I love that solo as well. So
do I. And while it is my number 9, I'll make the argument, or not make the argument, but make the continuation of that. I think because it was on a Michael Jackson song, I think it had to be toned down enough to be realistic, so it didn't overpower Michael Jackson. I think that was kind of that's what I always got out. I thought it was absolutely amazing, and I think being in that setting with Michael Jackson, I think it was almost, like you said, he almost had to turn it down a notch, sort of, but it was more polished, it was more refined, it wasn't sloppy, it wasn't all over the place, and it fit the song perfectly. I mean,
perfectly.
That song has a really great driving rhythm to it, and it's actually a pretty good rock song. I mean, I've always considered that more of a rock song than a pop song, but the solo is just, it's intense. It really is intense. I mean, it works so well with that song that it's almost scary. It's like, man, you should have been playing with Michael Jackson the whole time. But
yeah,
and I think that come up on our collaborations podcast a while back too, because it was a great podcast, but it was also a great collaboration and a great guitar solo, and that's why I don't have anything else to conclude other than that was my number 9 also. So it's pretty funny. So
weird. Well, speaking of Metallica, my number 9 actually was a Metallica song, and I struggled with this because I like Kirk Hammett as a guitar player. I think that he's talented. I think that he kind of fell at times into the Vai, Satriani realm where he did go a little bit over the top. But the solo in Shortest Straw off of And Justice for All has so many little tricks and drop-offs, and it's such a feel solo for me. And that song is a feel song from the get-go. I mean, when you start that song, it's a groove. It's almost a groove. It's not really a rock song. It's almost a groove. Right. And to get to that solo and have him do so many tricks and scales where they're supposed to be, and single note stuff, slowing it down where it's supposed to be, it has always hit me. Every time that song comes on, I will definitely turn the solo up on that one.
Yeah.
You could probably pick almost any song off of that album. I personally think that Hammett's best stuff were those first 4 albums, and I really liked him as a player up till including And Justice for All. I think he kind of lost a little bit of his edge after that. I have a hard time picking any of his solos, post And Justice for All.
Agreed.
But man, I think he did you could have picked any of those solos on And Justice for All, and I would have been.
It was hard. It was hard. I think one was a pretty good one as well. I think it got a lot of acclaim because the song was pretty popular. But I really felt that Shortest Straw has a lot more of that feel and change it up idea in it for me to feel that way. So
Fade to Black off of the Ride the Lightning album did it for me.
I actually went back and listened to that because I love the song anyways. It's one of the first songs I learned on acoustic, and I went back and listened to it, and I wasn't as impressed with it as I thought I was going to be. I didn't remember it being, I don't want to say it's cookie cutter, but it feels more like it was made for the song, but it just didn't stand out for me enough. So Pete, what do you got for number 8?
All right, my number 8 is kind of predictable here. That I have a couple on my list that might be kind of predictable, but they're just so damn good, even as played out as they are. Free Bird, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Alan Collins. I mean, come on.
Hold on. Do I need to mute George? Do I need to mute you, George?
I'm going to abstain from this one.
Go ahead.
You can. Here's my opinion on Freebird, the song. I probably never need to hear the song again, but if you were to edit down that song to just a guitar solo, I could listen to it every day, and I wouldn't care.
I'll give you that. Okay.
There you go. Enough. All right. So okay. I still think it's this, as iconic and overplayed as it is, it's still one of the greatest guitar solos ever made. And like I said, I could do away with ever hearing the song itself again, but I still love that guitar solo. So I'll end it there.
Is it only played by one, or do they trade off on that one?
Actually, Alan Collins was the only guy who played it.
Okay.
That furious ending solo. Yeah,
because I've seen them. I've seen them live after. Was it Johnny that died, or which one? Which was the singer that died?
Oh, Ronnie.
And I saw them without him after he'd passed away, and just seeing those two lead players play together is insane to watch. And I couldn't remember if that was a double solo or not at the end of that one, but
on the record it's just Alan Collins. Yeah.
Okay, brother, what do you got for 8?
This is the only one on my list. Well, other than the Stevie Ray Vaughan, this is the only one on my list that's kind of like I guess. It's not really a song. It's a classical. It's actually a classical guitar, no lyrics or whatever. So I guess it'd be considered an instrumental. It's Roy Clark, the Malagina, or I'm sorry, I'm not Spanish. I don't know how to pronounce it. That he did on The Odd Couple.
Oh yeah, that's incredible. Yeah.
We're talking virtuoso guitar epics, and Craig and I mentioned him last podcast too, but he just basically, and it was a one take thing in front of a live studio audience, and if you've never seen it, I mean, the only way it's obviously recorded on it's a TV show, so there's not it's not on an album or that I could find. He has recorded it, but the way he did it on The Odd Couple, the TV show, it's like a 3-minute blip of ridiculousness that just proved Roy Clark's prowess as a guitar virtuoso, and that
he He was incredible.
It's hard to consider it a solo, but I wouldn't be able to sleep if I didn't include it in my list of impressive guitar. I mean, it is a solo, but it's not, not in a song. And that was the only one that kind of skirts the area. But I know Craig and we talked about, everything was fair game if it was recorded or whatever. So it's kind of like the Freebird thing. I could watch it 1,000 times and never get tired of it. Just his strumming speed alone is staggering, let alone the fretwork that he does in that song. And it's always impressed me since I've seen it the first time and heard it the first time. And so I would be remiss if I didn't put it on this guitar solo acknowledgement anyway. So that was my number 8.
Good choice. Hell of a player, greatly missed, and that is. And I actually just watched that recently. Obviously, because he passed away, and I think a lot of us were going and watching all these Roy Clark clips. But that was a guitar excursion. Can you imagine being in the studio audience at the taping of that show that night, seeing that display?
That's what, and I think of I can't even think of their real name, Felix and Oscar. They're sitting on the couch watching him play it, and thinking, man, those guys got a front row seat to the show. Yeah. So, but
I thought he was just some country guy. Look at this guy blazing away over here. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, I'll jump in with my number 8, and I need to put George on mute again. Actually, probably the next 4 I need to put George on mute at this point. It's Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi.
That's all. You guys suck. That's on my list too.
Is it really?
It was. Yeah.
I was shocked. I thought that was like a no-go for you. I didn't.
Oh no. No, that's always been. It's like it might be 10 seconds long.
Sam Bora was, again, I think he kind of falls into that Brian May area where he's just extremely underappreciated for what he does. And, I honestly think that a lot of the Bon Jovi stuff was just toned down versions of what he could do. Side note, I've got one of my honorable mentions is actually from a guitar player who started out not being a very big soloist and then kind of came upon his own when he moved out of the band he was in. And that's kind of the way I feel about Sam Bora. There's some of his solo stuff that he did after Bon Jovi is just amazingly stand out, and it never got any acclaim or anything at that point. But yeah, that's definitely one of my top.
Oh yeah,
good player.
I mean that guitar solo always. And that falls into one of Pete's rants that if I ever hear it again, I don't care. But the guitar solo it always stuck out to me as just kind of super rad.
It's tasty.
Yeah, and it just took that song over. It just took
Yep.
that whole, oh, here we go, I'm a cowboy, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, wow, the guitar solo, like, wow, no, it's not a cowboy. That's badass rock and roll right there.
That's right. Yep, exactly.
So yeah, it kind of took that song over, and I always dug that it kind of pulled that song out of it, and it like went right back to where it was. So
yeah, it did almost change the feel of that song at that point. And I think the words even after it kind of also bring it around to being not about an Old West, guy. It ends up being a rock song after that point. So, where were we? Number 7?
Yeah.
Number 7. What you got for number 7, Pete?
All right, I'm going back to the early 70s here. Again, going back to a solo that just is instantly memorable, and everybody knows every note of it. Not that you can play it, but you can hum along to the entire solo. It's Aqualung by Jethro Tull, Martin Barr.
Sick. That's an awesome pick. Wow. That's a great pick. I haven't heard that song in a long time, and that's crazy. Cool.
It feels like
I did a YouTube show many months ago about top guitar solos in rock and metal and whatnot, and I completely did not, to my knowledge, include that. And then I was listening to the Aqualung album like about a week ago, and I'm like, I have got to put that on this list. How could I have ever forgotten about that solo?
Definitely. Wow. That's one of those.
Yeah, it's another one of those guitar players though that just never gets any acclaim.
Martin is incredible.
I know, but he's behind something that's so iconic with the flute, and you get stuck behind that, and unfortunately you get good stuff, but nobody knows who you are. So.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's disappointing that I forgot it and I haven't heard that in a long time, so I'm definitely gonna crank that up today. That's definitely gonna
I'll
be.
put the list together as soon as I can. But where do you got for 7, brother?
My number 7 is Wildflower by the Cult.
Ooh, wow.
I
So
always
Duffy.
so
I always
not Love Removal Machine.
there to me the Cult is has always been just rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I this is one of those bands that I could have picked. Me personally, I could have picked 10 songs. I just love the guitar work, and
It's
this
another
one
one.
just
It's melodic and it's simple and it fits, and that's
but
it.
this song always the guitar solo in Wildflower always just kind of stuck out to me as a little bit more impressive, and I mean the vocals I mean the whole song just flows really well, and the guitar solo is again it's kind of like the Bon Jovi one. It's not really that big, but it's just really impressive, and it just kind of it speeds it up and it slows the song down, and then it goes right back to where it was. And I'll do Pete's swimming arm thing there again. It kind of roller coasters, but in a shorter period of time. But the Cold has always been one of my favorites, top 5 bands of all time for me. I always kind of dug the Cult, and that song, the guitar solo in that song is one of my favorite songs, and the guitar solo is one of my favorite solos. So
Yeah.
other than that, that's why I picked that.
I literally waffled between Stone Cold Crazy and Love Removal Machine as my number 10. I really did. It's their soloist isn't, or the guitar player isn't, over the top. He isn't,
No.
playing scales here and there and stuff. It's just good, solid rock. It reminds me a lot of the 70s type solos that you hear in a lot of the 60s, late 60s and early 70s stuff. So,
Well, I think it falls into that the guitar didn't overtake the vocals and didn't overtake the bass or the drums. I think it just fit. And that's the way the Cult always came off to me, is they all just kind of worked together, and their music just kind of, a lot of it was same-ish, I guess. I mean, a lot of it, I mean, there were no like breakout or standout songs. I think it was their third or not, maybe their fourth album, their self-titled one. They had some really great stuff on. I mean, I like most of their stuff. So, but they always just kind of gelled better than a lot of those kind of obscure, not really obscure, but those mid '90s bands that kind of, well, I guess they were in the '80s, late '80s and early '90s there. That just kind of, they were there, But I always dug them, and that solo always stuck out to me as one of the best in their catalog. So.
I'll go on record saying Billy Duffy was a pretty underrated guitar player. Still.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, he's not Steve Vai, but I mean,
No, they didn't need to be in that band.
No,
though.
I was just gonna say he didn't need to be. He beat me to it. He didn't really need to be, because it was just an epic. It was a great band that made a lot of good music and never got a ton of. Well, I mean, they were, but they didn't get really a ton of recognition, really. So.
well, I'm going to offer for Pete to go ahead and grab a drink or something while I'm giving my number 7, which is Paradise City by Guns N' Roses.
I knew you were going to clue one of them.
Yeah, and yes, I am a big fan, but I really had I struggled with that because Slash is an amazing guitar player, but he was really good at writing rhythms. Him and it was really good. They were really good at playing off each other. And his solos, honestly, a lot of them on that first album, first album. Well, yeah, we've had that discussion before. A lot of solos were kind of that breakaway feel where it was, I noticed it. I noticed that they were moving away from the song to do a solo, but the solo at the end of that song is just 2 minutes of just.
It's intense. There's no
It's
doubt.
intense and insane, and I won't say much more about it because I know it's still cliche for Guns N' Roses to be on my list because I am a fan of Guns N' Roses, but I did actually. I mean, that's still one that I wait for the end of the song and I turn it up. I turn it up on that spot because I love how it fits with the music and how it turns to double time right as when the solo starts. So
Well, I mean, you guys know my opinion on Guns N' Roses, so we won't go there again. But I always give Slash his due, and I will tell you, I think he's got plenty of memorable solos on that album.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, and I mean, it's hard to deny his prowess. I mean, he's made a living at playing guitar. I mean, he's by there are a lot worse guitar players to be had. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
So,
my opinion mirrors Pete's a lot. I mean, I've never been a huge Guns N' Roses fan, but it's hard to deny, the impact that album had and Slash's guitar work on it, and since, I mean, with Slash's Snake Pit and Velvet Revolver and so on and so forth. I mean,
So join us on our next podcast where we pick our top 5 Guns N' Roses songs. Without Pete part of it.
That might be a one man podcast, kid.
Pete,
I'll be on vacation that week.
Right. What do you got for number 6, Pete?
My number 6 is the only instrumental song on my list, but I had to include it because it's just the guitar. Well, there's actually 2 solos on here, but I'm actually pointing it out for one of them, although they're both equally great. It's In Memory of Elizabeth Reed by the Allman Brothers, featuring Duane Allman. That's really the solo. There's 2 solos in there. One's by Duane, one's by Dickie. Duane's is just like chill-inducing. Just awesome stuff. You could arguably say that most of that song is just guitar solo, but it really is kind of like this kind of jazzy thing for a couple of minutes, and then Duane just blisters into this amazing guitar solo, and then it goes back to the main part of the song, and then Dickie comes in and rips it up at the end. So it's, I had to include it there because, man, Duane Allman, what a player.
And Southern rock really gave us a lot of good feel solos, a lot of good solos that had that, a lot of bends and a lot of trills and carryovers that just they make a song feel good. So
yeah, I think that helped a lot of those songs. I mean, having great guitar work, and most of the Southern rock bands had 2 guitar players, and they were both great.
Yeah.
Leonard Skinner and
Outlaws.
Right. I mean, there was a lot of that dual guitar sound was kind of notable. I mean, and that definitely plays into it, and especially when you got 2 great solos like in that song. I mean, that's cool. I dig that pick.
What do you got for 6, brother?
Let's see. Well, it's kind of a newcomer. I have Numb by Gary Clark Jr.
That's a good choice.
I don't know if I've heard that one. I'm going to have to pull that up.
I credit you, George, for turning me on to that guy.
We're getting close to my top 5, and it was hard not to there's so much greatness for us to come yet here in the top 5, but so I kind of, being that he's newer to the scene, I put him at number 6. Really bluesy feel, really, I mean, to me it's as close as we're going to get to a Stevie Ray Vaughan in this generation. I mean, and that's, for me, that's saying a lot. But that song is really, really filthy. It's just it makes you feels like you need a shower, like you got scraped off the bottom of somebody's shoe. And that solo, it's kind of a long solo towards the middle end of the song, and it's just.
So we're talking about guitar solos, right?
Yeah.
Making sure. Okay.
Well, listen to that song and tell me otherwise, because it really is. It's filthy. It's just. It really shows who that guy is, and I mean, it was the first single I heard from him, and everything I've heard has gotten better. But I'm going with, I picked Numb because it was the first song I heard, and the guitar solo was just ridiculous in that
it's
song.
a good one. It is.
Well, my 6th one is actually a cover, sort of. So in 2004, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame played While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Prince does the solo in it, and I will literally fast forward to just that spot and watch it over and over and over. He was so fluid when he played in general anyways, but to watch him solo and walk around the stage and almost there's one point where he looks at Tom Petty, and I'm not sure if he's goading him on or if he's teasing him or what, but the way he's playing when he's standing in front of him just is like, and the look on the Tom Petty's face is crazy. I'll see if I can link the video, but to step back to his prowess and his command of guitar, I think Prince was definitely looked at as a pop artist, but he could have fit into any rock band of 60s.
He could do it all.
Yeah,
he could do it all.
60s,
He played
70s,
like
80s,
17
90s.
instruments.
But he played them well. He played the guitar.
Oh,
he played solo. I mean, I think I don't want to say he missed his calling because he was certainly a pop artist. I mean, in his full rights, but he could have he could have slid into any rock band at that time and just shredded everywhere where he needed to be. So.
He absolutely could have. And I was kind of always waiting for him to do that.
Yeah, just once.
Yeah.
Jump into something.
Did you guys ever get to see him live?
I never saw him live.
I saw him once at Madison Square Garden. Wow. Yeah, he really played some kick-ass guitar that night.
Yeah, it was between that.
Screaming guitar.
Even at the end of Let's Go Crazy is ridiculous. Yeah, and I mean, but the While My Guitar Gently, I think he was almost walking around stage mocking all those like Hall of Fame guitar.
Yeah, I think so.
Almost. I mean, that's almost the way that performance comes off. I mean, he was almost like thumbing his nose and like, see, I can do this way better than you guys.
Well, and it was that, and he'd played at the Super Bowl not too long before he passed away too, and man, as a guitarist, Pete, you'll understand, playing guitars like that in the rain while it's raining and keeping the tone going and keeping the song going is super difficult to do. And so it was between those two for me. So, we're already at 45 minutes. Hey, sit back, get relaxed because we got our top 5. So,
yes, exactly.
Pete, what do you got for 5?
All right, so I'm going to pick a live one here, and you can find this on YouTube. It's readily available. This was recorded in Europe in 1987. I had to include my man Gary Moore on here, one of my favorite players of all time. There is a live version of the Empty Rooms song on YouTube from that tour. That you look it up, Gary Moore, Empty Rooms, best solo ever. That's what I'm pretty sure that's what the description is. And it's basically an extended version of the Empty Rooms song with a just uncanny long guitar solo at the end that is just so dripping with emotion and feel, and it screams, and it just shows like why he was one of the best guitar players ever on this planet, and I miss him so much. I'm getting emotional just talking about it. I miss this guy. I think everybody has like their musical heroes that they just love to death in their life. And, when they pass away, you really miss. And I just miss this guy so much.
Definitely.
That's interesting. You'd mention
that. Solo just kills me. And I make a point of watching that on YouTube at least once every couple months just to kind of make me feel even worse about how much I miss him. But it's just such a breathtaking solo. It's incredible. It has a little bit of everything that made Gary Moore such a great player.
Yeah, I'll step aside to that too. And George posted just a few minutes before we started on Facebook that it was the 14th anniversary. 14th of Dimebag Darrell's death.
14 years already.
Yeah, and another great musician lost, and Prince is gone. Tom Petty's gone. We mentioned a lot of guys that have kind of, I've talked about this before that I think musicians in the time that passed away in like the 70s and 80s, you really didn't hear much about them because there wasn't global internet where you could follow that stuff on a regular basis. I think as we get closer to, being next to each other, even though we're millions of miles away or thousands of miles away from each other, the death of musicians starts to hit harder. And we're getting in that era where a lot of those guys are getting at that age where we're just going to start losing them. You're going to see it
frequently.
It is. And you're going to see it on a regular basis, unfortunately. So, what do you got for number 5, brother?
My number 5 is Clean My Wounds by Corrosion Conformity. Corrosion Conformity is an underrated rock metal band to me, always have been. But that song actually got some radio play, and Woody I can't think of his last name. The guitar player,
Weatherman.
Woody Weatherman. To me, the guitar tone was that band. It was a step different than everybody else. It was darker, it was heavier, it was lower, it was grittier, and but the guitar solo in Clean My Wounds just has always stood out to me as this epic. It changed the course of the way I listen to music, and that was one of the first songs that actually the guitar solo stood out to me. I know that sounds bad, but because not playing guitar or not focusing on the guitar, I just listened for the music. Whatever made me, but that song was awesome, but the guitar solo pulled me into that band. And I once I heard that song and that guitar solo, I started listening to that band, and then I started expanding and realizing, and that was early 90s, probably 91, 2, somewhere in there when that was out. And maybe, I don't know if it was that early or not, but anyway, that Clean My Wound, there's a lot of good guitar work. Even solos in the Deliverance album there's even like a couple instrumental songs, but Clean My Wounds was my number 5 for intents and purposes.
Good choice.
Mine really has nothing to do with anything. Feels it's just damn good rock and roll. Let There Be Rock by AC/DC. There's like 3 solos in that, and you can pick which one you want, but they just keep getting more and more intense every time he breaks off and Angus starts playing. But that last solo I get the same feels about that one that I do the Guns N' Roses one at the end of Paradise City. It's like I just want to get out of my car and stomp on the ground while it's playing in that 4/4 beat. Just, it's like he's on steroids or something at that point at the end of the song where that last solo is. Yeah, I don't, there's nothing but feels on that one. I don't have any. Angus is he's not an exceptional guitar player, but he makes the feels work right on every solo he puts in.
It'd be hard to get any kind of argument on, especially on that song. I mean, Angus's guitar solos are, Angus's guitar solos. Let There Be Rock. I mean, obviously, if anybody's listened to any of these podcasts, that was my number 1 top 25 of all time. So, I mean, I wouldn't even begin to argue. So, it's most certainly epic to say the least.
Oh, yeah. He's got a lot of good ones. I was just grooving to a whole lot of Rosie just yesterday.
Yeah, it's a good one, too.
And that was my flip-flop for number 1. So, no argument there either. So.
What you got for 4, Pete?
All right, so if you can't already tell, I like guitar solos that kind of tell a story and take you on the journey, and my number 4 has been doing that to me for probably about 40 years now. Rock Bottom by UFO with Mr. Michael Schenker, one of my favorite players of all time.
Schenker was amazing.
Yeah, that solo, just you wait for it, it starts, and it takes you on that journey, and you just don't want to get off.
No, and the song it's not very long either, is it? Or is that one of the longer ones?
It's like, I think the song itself is like 7 or 8 minutes, but he goes off for
that's what it is.
Half, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what it is. I feel like the song's so short because you get to that end and it's like almost a different feel. Not a different feel, almost like a different version of the song. It's like he took the song and made it a solo of just that for the first part of the song. Oh man, I can't wait to go back and listen to that one again.
For sure.
Brother, what do you got for 4?
Slow hands. I got Sunshine of Your Love by Cream. I think, I mean, you can pick any Clapton probably. I mean, most people, but that song is so melodic and so like, it feels deep and heavy, but the solo is, to use Pete's words, it takes you on a journey. It takes that song someplace else. To me, it always has. It's almost surreal the way that song feels, and then when the solo hits, it's like, wow. And didn't really see that coming at that time, and I think that was kind of right at the epicenter of real guitar solos. I mean, that was late 60s where it really started to fade in, and obviously Clapton is undeniable as one of the best in the business to do that too. And that song I always loved that song, and I always loved that solo more. So
He was a breath of fresh air at the time, man, I tell you.
yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of sludge in the that kind of folk rock and stuff that was going on, and especially, I mean, even Cream. I mean, a lot of their music was on that line, but that song there, I think, definitely broke that mold, for me anyway.
Well, my next three are. It's weird. I just realized I put 4 and 3 together, and I'm going to have to talk about them because they're going to be back to back. So 4 is "Are You Experienced" by Jimi Hendrix for me. I can't think of any other time where someone has recorded a solo backwards and made it sound so good.
Yeah.
And made it fit so good. I mean, if you listen to that, obviously the rhythm's running behind him in regular, in forward time, and the solo's running backwards over it. I can't imagine what it would even had taken at the time to record that and to do that and make it sound right, and it still sounds like it fits perfectly. It's scary.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that one, but that is actually staggering that he actually recorded it forward and played it backwards or whatever, or recorded it backwards or whatever.
Leave it to Jimmy.
Yeah, leave it to Jimmy.
Yeah, that's pretty epic.
You'll see where I tie that back in on 3. It's a little crossover, but what you got for 3, Pete?
Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd and David Gilmour.
I didn't put it on my list, but I'm so glad somebody did.
Yeah, it's got to be there, right? That's another one of those solos that just kind of takes you on a journey, right? And you wait for it, and it's like, even if, again, it's another one of those songs that we probably all heard to death, but man, I never tire of that guitar solo, boy.
No, I 100% agree with that, because the rest of the song is like, okay, come on, wait for the solo, just get through.
Can we get there quicker, please?
Yeah. Just hang on, the solo's coming. That's the way.
But
that's
Gilmour
actually
makes
how I think of that song.
He makes a business of making a solo tell a story, though. I think he comes from that writing angle where I think he's a good writer of music, period, and to make an image come out of what he's playing is kind of his forte. There's a lot of guitars out there that will throw a solo in and it fits really good and it's solid, but he just makes it feel like an extension of the story all the time, every single time. But that one is definitely stand out.
No doubt.
What you got for number 3, brother?
Number 3 is, we mentioned it is the anniversary, is "I'm Broken" by Pantera. Daryl Abbott, as we're recording this, is the 14th anniversary of him being shot in the face on stage, and Pantera is a huge part of my teenage years. I mean, the teen angst didn't even begin to scratch the surface compared to listening to Pantera with teen angst. But that one, Daryl's solo or his guitar work, I mean, is literally world renowned. But that song, it kind of got some radio play because it was a little more polished, a little less heavy, if that's a word. And but the guitar solo in "I'm Broken" was just really showcased his ability to turn it down. I mean, there's Pantera songs that, I mean, he literally goes off the deep end shredding the guitar, but "I'm Broken" was kind of like the Eddie Van Halen we talked about earlier. I mean, it was a little more polished, a little more radio friendly, a little more exquisite, as far as showing his basic abilities to really write a great, guitar riff. And I mean, the song itself to me is just, it really changes your mood. But for me, the solo, and that's the solo I picked out of all of them, just out of respect for him and for respect that I just love the band, and his guitar work was definitely one of my favorites as far as the heavier metal bands go. So
it's one of my favorite riffs of all time from him.
Yeah, it
and if we ever decide to do a riff show, you would better include that in there.
Now, is that the one?
No doubt.
Is that the one that Nickelback carried over?
No.
Into Slide of a Bullet?
Nickelback, no, they I'm not even sure. I've heard several times different songs that they use, but they actually copied one of Daryl's solos in the song "Side of a Bullet" because Nickelback wrote the song after he was shot and killed or whatever on stage, and much like to echo Pete's sentiment, there are bands and their band members that are taken away or that we've lost that really hurt, and that was a huge part of my being. And now we've lost two of them. Both brothers are gone now. Vinnie Paul passed away recently too. So to have the guitar player and the drummer from Pantera gone now, it kind of it's bittersweet for me. But that's Craig messaged me earlier before we started to record, that and I thought it was poetic justice that we're recording a guitar solo podcast on the anniversary of his death. So I thought that was actually pretty cool, actually.
So I'll jump in with my number 3 and kind of explain what I meant with number 4. So it's funny because this song actually being third on my list was odd because we were sitting at dinner last night and my wife goes, there's that one song you always keep telling me, shut up in the car and you make Max be quiet and you make us at the solo part. You always just make us shut up. And I can't remember what one it is. And I couldn't remember it either. So we looked through like 90s one-hit wonders and 90s, rock lists. And I remembered, like, as soon as I saw it, I remembered what it was. But it's the solo in Yellow Ledbetter by Pearl Jam. And that song is very reminiscent of Little Wing. A lot of that song kind of sounds a lot like it. If you listen to the solo, it has a lot of closeness to. Have you not put that together, brother? You have.
Oh no, it does. And go ahead. I'll let you.
I think McCready's gone on record saying that Hendrix is one of his favorite players, I think, right?
Yeah. And I think you're going to get influences from the guitar players that you, I mean, honestly, a lot of my style came from listening to people like Slash and Jimmy Page. So, I got my influences from that as well. But yeah, that solo is one of those ones where I will put my headphones in or I'll make everybody be quiet in the car because the solo in that is so dreamy and feeling and just swells. Here, I'm going to do the hand thing that you guys are doing so nobody can see all three of us doing it.
And it's a trifecta.
There you go.
So, but yeah, that was my number 3. So, what do you got for 2, Pete?
For me, kind of a game changer at the time. Still to this day, I love it. Child in Time by Deep Purple with my man Richie Blackmore. Again, it's another one of those extended. You can tell I like extended guitar solos. This is a pretty long solo. I think it's like a minute and a half or 2 minutes or so. In the middle of this very kind of just downbeat kind of song that just explodes with screaming vocals and a Hammond organ solo and then a blistering guitar solo from Blackmore. And and ironically, Richie hates the solo.
What?
Yeah, he has gone on record many times saying that he hated the solo on the original In Rock album. And, it's arguable whether I like the original studio version better than the Made in Japan live version. Both solos are completely different, but they're both just absolutely incredible. So that's my number 2.
That song kind of, like you said, it almost explodes in the middle.
Yeah.
You listen to songs like Stairway to Heaven where it's kind of a straight crescendo slowly moving up, and that one's like flat, boom, flat.
Yeah, because as soon as the solo's done, all of a sudden we get back to the boom, 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 bum, ba-da-ba-ba, and you're like, my God, it just brought you down from where you just were, right?
What just happened?
My face just melted, and now I'm like seeping into the ground, It's
That's funny.
Exactly.
What'd you get for number 2, brother?
I had to have Stevie Ray Vaughan. I had to have Texas Flood.
Really?
That's a great one.
No, I didn't see that coming. not taking away anything from it because it's amazing.
Again,
but
pick one.
yeah.
I just happen to think Texas the again, this falls into that. Is it really a solo, or is it? I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan is kind of an enigma where you can't really. Yes, there are songs, but like his whole guitar work, could be considered a solo. The intro could be considered a solo. So to me, I picked that one because that was more of a complete song and almost like a separate solo in it, rather than a lot of his stage work. And I mean, this is the recorded version too, because I mean, there's a lot of the, he's got a lot of stage, recorded live recordings that showcase his obvious guitar talent. But Texas Flood always stood out to me as it was so melodic and slowed it down enough where you could actually get a real feel for the guy's talent. As the way I always felt, anyway. And I mean,
it's packed with emotion too, which is what I always loved about Stevie's playing. You feel it in your gut, right, when you hear a guitar solo from him.
That was always my thing about Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I get not quite the same from Gary Clark Jr., but close. But it felt like the guy left his soul out there. His soul fell out on stage. When that guy was out there, and people that are missed. Stevie Ray Vaughan, if I could bring one back, it would be Stevie Ray Vaughan. That guy did things for music, for blues, for rock, for guitar that very few have. I mean, there's been a lot of great musicians, a lot of great guitar players, but as far as working class, blue collar guitar player, I mean, that guy made blues popular again. Yep. in a time when nobody wanted to hear it. And because of just on his sheer talent alone, I believe. So.
And you know what? He didn't have to die that night.
No.
And I think that guy brought himself back up from the depths of hell and addiction and was at a great point in his life. And he really did not have to get on that helicopter that night. No. He shouldn't have.
He was trying to get back to his fiancée and moving into their new apartment or whatever, and just trying to get back a little bit faster. And well, I mean, that's the past, but that one truly bums me out because there are people if there was somebody I could pick to watch over and over. I mean, if I had only one guy to watch on YouTube videos or whatever, it'd be Stevie Ray Vaughan, because it just boggles my mind what that guy did with an instrument.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, that we've talked a couple times about guitarists that we like to watch. You mentioned Gary Moore, Pete, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I mentioned watching Prince play, and even if you watch the one that did the instrumental acoustic that you talked about earlier, Roy Clark.
Yeah.
Watch him play and watch the expressions on his face, and it's almost a second level to this. That we could almost do guitar solos we love to watch as compared to guitar solos we love to listen to, and maybe it make a whole second.
That's no, that's probably
out of it. I'll jump into my number two though. The only way I can describe this song is like a cake, and it's "Paranoid" by Black Sabbath. If you listen to the song, it's like small pieces of a song played in like one measure, and then it dead stops, and then it starts the next piece of the cake. But when you get to the solo, it doesn't break that mold. The beat of that song is constant throughout. It's like each individual pieces of cake, and when he plays the solo, he plays it over those each individual pieces of cake and stops when it stops. But it also goes back to that Stone Cold Crazy idea where he's double tracking the solo, and it's not the same. I mean, there's parts in it where he's playing in the same chord, but he's not playing the same notes even close. Yeah. Love that feel. Love how it fits within the cake pieces. Love how it fits within the song itself. Love how he just goes off on tangents on different tracks. It was difficult to not put it number two. My number one is something that I've loved since I heard it the first time. But yeah, number two is "Paranoid" by Black Sabbath for me.
You guys know the story behind the recording of "Paranoid," right? So they basically had finished up recording the album, and this is back in the day where they put together an album in 2 or 3 days, and it was a little bit short, and the producer said to the guys, you need to go and write something real quick because we got to fill up some space on the album. And they just actually went back into the studio and just threw Paranoid together in like a matter of an hour.
Wow.
I had no idea. No idea.
That was just basically a last minute add-on.
And one of their biggest hits.
Yep.
Well, and now that you mention it, like I said, it feels like it's like they're playing a measure, like they just maybe wrote a measure of a song and then just started playing it over and over again. That's the way that song always felt to me, is when you get to that stop at the end of that one measure, it kind of like picks up and does the same exact thing again, and then the same exact thing again. And now that you've mentioned that, wow, that's really weird. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
And it's like, it's one of the, Sabbath is my second favorite band of all time, and probably the band that absolutely changed my musical life forever. I will admit that I probably never need to hear Paranoid ever again, but it's so perfect in its simplicity, and it's I think the first song that I ever learned to play on guitar from start to finish.
Awesome.
And it's just it's easy to learn and play, and it's fun to play.
And it gets everybody excited.
Anymore, it's like.
So we're to the number one spot, and I'm sure everybody spent like their time agonizing over this. So let's hear it, Pete. What do you got?
So this was always going to be my number one, and it's my number one because I think it's a solo that tells a story. And I'm going to tell the story first before and see if you guys know what it is. So the lyrical message behind this story is all about the Vietnam War. The guitar solo in this song was meant to put the listener in the place of a soldier in the fields of Vietnam with bombs going off and mortars flying and machine guns. Oh, I just gave up the title of the song. Machine Gun by Band of Gypsies and Jimi Hendrix. It's one of the most incredibly chaotic, noisy solos of all time, but I listen to it and my whole body goes numb and just chills go up and down my spine. And I just think it brings together everything that made Hendrix so great. It's kind of bluesy, it's noisy, it's rocking, he's using all sorts of effects and the whammy bar and wah-wah and the univibe and fuzz, and it's just, you really... I'll tell you, I'll continue my story real quick if you guys will allow me.
Yeah, no, go.
So a few months ago, my wife and I were having a musical discussion about like long guitar solos because it's not really her thing. And we started talking about Hendrix, and I said, but sometimes there are players out there who can actually tell a story with a guitar solo, and you need to like kind of look past the length of it. So she goes, give me an example of something like that. So I said, all right, I'm going to play you a Jimi Hendrix song. And I told her what the lyrical idea of the song was. And I said, this is what Hendrix was trying to convey. I want you to listen to this song, close your eyes, and let me know how you feel. And she did. And she goes, wow. She goes, I really felt like I was some scared soldier in Vietnam with all this stuff happening around me. And it made me feel like, terrified. God, and I think he did a great job of just honing in on that.
I got goosebumps just listening to the story. That's crazy. I can't wait to dig into that again. So many songs out of that era were obviously going to be feel songs because they were writing against the war and trying to get people to understand what they didn't like about it. But that one's the pinnacle of that explanation. That was perfect. Thanks, man.
It's epic. It's an epic solo. I mean,
again, that kind of falls into this. You could pick a lot of Jimi Hendrix.
Oh yeah.
But certain ones stand out, and especially through what we've discussed over in just past podcasts and whatnot. It's that song that truly is epic, as far as being part of the musician taking the listener on a journey. I mean, that, like you said, if you get no feels from that song, you shouldn't listen to music. That's what
bingo.
Absolutely.
Perfect. You put it just right.
That's why I always felt a lot of Jimi Hendrix, but that song it's almost scary. I mean, how, like you said, there a lot of Floyd songs tell stories. A lot of songs tell stories. That one's just different because the music tells the story.
Yeah.
And makes you feel different. Through the whole thing. So
what do you got for number one, brother? What's the top of the list? Boston.
It's
Interesting.
Wasted Years by Iron Maiden.
Oh.
Wow. Totally not expecting that. Okay.
I commend you for that pick.
Because
that's a good
because
one.
Steve Harris and Adrian Smith, the bass and the guitar almost have solos where they like bounce off each other in that song. And the song itself, always a huge favorite. The solo, when it gets to that part of the song, it's like
Dave Murray kills it on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it and again, it starts off as kind of like almost like a bass solo. I mean, he starts off and then the guitar feeds off that, and then it kind of goes back to Harris, and then it goes back, and I've never been able to get that guitar solo out of my head. I've never been able to get that song out of my head. I always, Craig and I used to run home from school and watch. It was this crappy like UHF channel that played videos for like an hour, right? Like at 4:00 in the afternoon. V32, and but the way I used to we used to go to the flea market and buy Iron Maiden posters because of Eddie the Head. We we'd had our wall was covered in Iron Maiden posters, the Trooper and Somewhere in Time and Power Slave and all of those, but that song always stuck out to me as it was just it's a great song about tour life, being on the road or whatever, but when the guitar solo hits, when the bass and the guitar play off each other like that, to me it's one of the best. I've never found a guitar solo that fit a song better than that one. And Iron Maiden's Wasted Years is my number one on the guitar solo scale. So
listeners can't see it, but I'm offering George a high five right now because I really
Video
like
high
that.
five.
That I did not expect that pick, and
Me either.
The more I'm hearing you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, that's a good one.
It's
I love that song.
It's funny because, sometimes we've talked about songs here that I haven't heard for a long time, and I kind of had to reach back and go, what does that solo sound like? But as soon as you said that one, it was like, yeah, I got that one. Yeah, that's right there. You're right. I could listen to that over and over.
Now try to believe I passed up Clapton and Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan for Iron Maiden solo.
Mine's I think I've actually mentioned mine before. Mine's kind of a shocker probably too, that it's my number one, but it's still one that I have found that every time I listen to it, the song it's not an over the top song. It's not, it's wasting my time by default. And it's not an over the top song. It's not a, standout song. It wasn't extremely popular. It gets radio play here and there, but every time I listen to that song and get to the solo, it feels like it's almost organic. It's almost like it's part of the root of the song. And it's, again, he's using a little bit of wah in it, and it's just, I have no words to explain it. And there's a reason it's my number one on my list above things like AC/DC and, Short of Straw and Paradise City. And I can't listen. I will, this is one of those songs where if there is music or something or noise or something going on in the car when it comes on, I will go home and listen to the song again. I will listen to the entire song. I will put it on my headphones and I'll listen to the entire song again and turn it up when it gets to the solo, because it fits that feel of that song just to a T. And I just can't explain how much that attracts me to that song and why
it's all about what moves us, right, on an individual level.
It's all about the feel. That's it. It's all about the feel. And it truly is. It's a great song. We've passed. Anyway, we've passed. It's hard to believe. I'm sure Pete would agree. We've passed up 100 other great guitar players, great solos, great songs even. And that's what makes this kind of fun is, couple weeks we've been whittling away at this and we've been back and forth, behind the scenes. Hey, I'm still at like 25. Where are you guys at? And I think that's some of the best part about this stuff, because Craig and I agonized about the top 25 and Pete played along with that too. And it's like, man, it's difficult. The ones you have to leave off are worse than the ones that you have to pick.
Oh yeah.
Well, speaking of that, just give me 3 off your overrun list, Pete. Just real quick.
Well, I almost have to mention him because none of us mentioned him. I'm going to give a shout out to Jimmy Page.
See?
Since I've Been Loving You by Led Zeppelin, and I'm not going to pick Stay Away. I love the solo in Since I've Been Loving You.
I agree.
I have a pretty extensive, I think I have 12 in my honorable mentions, but I want to, if we don't have the time for it, I want to at least call one guy out here because I've been listening to a lot of Rush lately, and I got to tell you something. It really, really, really pained me to not include a Rush song on there because I think Alex Lifeson has some of the most unique guitar solos of all time.
Working Man solo?
Working Man, I mean, Free Will, Limelight, but my honorable mention for him was, and again, it's an instrumental tune, but La Villa Strangiato.
Yeah.
I mean, just some of his solos just sound so cool and different, and they fit the song.
Yep.
And it really, really pained me not to include him. If I could just throw one more out here.
Sure.
Again, for its uniqueness, and it's probably an oddball pick for most people. But the song is Firth of Fifth by Genesis. It's an old Genesis tune with Peter Gabriel on vocals and Steve Hackett on guitar. And that guitar solo just totally moves me. It's just so atmospheric and like emotional, and it's not a million notes. I highly recommend everybody to go out and listen to that.
Yeah.
It's perfectly constructed.
I'll throw all these on the Spotify list so we can kind of dig back into them again. But what you got 3 off the top of your head, brother?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I had one, A Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi was kind of an honorable mention. I had, oddly enough, I had a Nickelback song. I had Follow You Home by Nickelback. Which
Interesting.
I know they take a lot of guff, but they are a pretty decent rock, and some of their songs are pretty heavy. But Follow You Home is kind of it's more of a bluesy, kind of an ugly solo, but it really works with the song. It kind of pulls the song together. And I had one, it was going to be my almost parting shot for my brother was Don't Change That Song by Faster Pussycat.
It's a good solo too. Yeah.
Because it was so campy, and they were very basically unheard of. They had that House of Pain song that got a lot of radio play, but I think Craig and I it's a really kind of good, for what came out of that era, it was a really good rock song, Don't Change That Song. And the guitar solo was really good. I mean, and if anybody, that'd be my $50 bet. If anybody could name one band member from Faster Pussycat, I would be impressed. But,
no.
I'll go on record and say Faster Pussycat was probably the single worst band I've ever seen live in my entire life.
Oh, that hurts.
I
could see it.
They were terrible.
100% believable. I would I wouldn't even question it. That was more of a jab at Craig because I know he would know that. He would know that.
They opened up for the equally bad Vince Neil. I regret going to that concert.
Man.
Oh, wow, you paid money for that?
Yes, yeah.
To Ticketmaster, probably. I didn't have too many on my list. Like I said, my list was kind of short anyways. I did have I mentioned this guy earlier. I had 1,000 Faces by Creed. Tremonti is a guitar player that
He's incredible.
Yeah, that I've definitely been a fan of, and I think he was I think he honestly, when he left Creed the first time before they came back to do that extra album, he really put his nose to the grindstone and became an amazing lead guitar player. His leads in Creed were okay. They weren't over the top, but once that last album they put out, if you listen to the solo, 1,000 Faces, it's amazing. And his solo stuff and his work with Alter Bridge is.
I had the Blackbird song, the Alter Bridge song, on my honorable mentions. I mean, that's incredible for both of them. They both did great performances on that one.
But I will throw the parting shot out, and it's also a parting shot kind of for both you guys, but more because I really wanted this on my list because I do love this solo, but it didn't show up on any of you guys, so luckily it can be a good parting shot. But Hotel California by the Eagles.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
hard to deny it.
two guitar players
It's
playing
incredible.
off each other.
Yeah. It is. I didn't have it on my list, but I thought about it, and I
did
almost
too.
was like, if I can put Freebird on my list, that's got to be there too. But I left it off. But yeah, I had a feeling someone was going to bring it up today, because how can you not?
It's too bad because it's such a way overplayed, and it just it starts and I get nauseated almost. But if I last long enough and I get to that solo, those two guys playing off each other, and
It's worth
again,
the wait, right?
it is worth the wait. But unfortunately, you got to go through that. It's long enough song where you got to go through 4.5, 5 minutes of.
Oh, at least. Yeah.
I know every single word of the song. I know every single note to the song. I really don't want to listen to the song, but I'll get a piece of candy at the end.
And we're deviating from, I think, the point of the show, but
Yeah.
with a song like that, if we could all limit ourselves, we put together that list of most overplayed songs ever, right? If we could limit ourselves to just hearing all those, because I don't think any of us hate any of those songs by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
If we could limit to just hearing those once a year, and that's it, we'd probably look forward to the entire song that once a year, right?
That's true. I no joke, yesterday heard on the radio in the morning and in the evening, Stairway to Heaven.
Wow, twice in one day. That's too
Twice in one day.
That's...
But you're right. I think we're looking at solos that are that we love and are in our hearts and we care about, and we listen for those songs for that reason. It's sad that I don't have Hotel California on my list, because that is one of my. I could have put it in my top 10 with no question, but I think because you hear it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, because you can't flip the station on without hearing it, it numbs it down. And you're right. Once a year, I'm good with it. I could put the headphones on, sit back and listen to the whole song, but it's depressing.
Well, that's why. I mean, I had Rocky Mountain Way by Joe Walsh. I mean, I like Joe Walsh. His guitar. I mean, he's as sloppy and as polished as he's all over the gambit. I mean, he was an early, he was on the list, but I mean, more so for just because it's, Joe Walsh. I mean, but I mean, if you listen to songs like The Confessor, I mean, that's more or less like that falls into those, almost instrumental, way too long. It's like it got scribbled off the list early, if we're going for just solos. But I think the list we comprised is, between the three of us, I mean, if you can't pick, out of with the extras, almost 40 songs, if you guys can't find a solo, if you're listening and you can't find a solo that you like or a guitar player that you like, and use this as I think, like the rest of our podcasts have always been, use this as a way to delve into the rest of this band's catalog. Yep. The UFOs, the Iron Maidens, pick one that we've picked out and listen to that song, listen to that solo, and then see what else they got. See if something else turns you guys on. See if something else works for anybody else. And that's always been my basis with this stuff is to find something that moves you, listen to music and get into it, because to me music is life, man. That's what it's about. Yeah. And finding something that you like, and if it moves you, that's the deal. That's always been my deal. So
I think our lists do a great job across the board of mixing up some maybe more obvious choices with some stuff that's maybe more obscure but very personal to us, and that's a great way for people, like you said, to kind of dive into stuff that maybe they hadn't heard before, and that's always what I try to accomplish in stuff like this. So I think
I went from Cream to Pantera, so if you can't find something in between in there, you're not listening hard enough.
Well, I think that's the great tie-up from you guys. Pete, as always, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Once again, this was a blast, as always.
Yeah, brother, awesome. And we'll catch up with another one in a couple weeks. You
Perfect.
Guys have a good day.
Sounds good, man.
Yep, see ya.
Bye-bye.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, Sybert.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.